I used to think the library breathed in a slower rhythm than the rest of town, as if the clock inside its walls had learned to walk softly. That was where she moved most days. A quiet woman who kept the place warm in the way lamplight warms a winter window. She arrived before the parking lot yawned awake, slipped the key into the stubborn door, and greeted the dust as though it were a flock returning home. Shelves straightened under her hands. Dog-eared pages forgave the world. Lost jackets reunited with their books, like birds finding their nests. People brushed past her name the way wind brushes past a small tree. They noticed the bloom but not the roots. She held story time without fanfare, stitched loose bindings with careful thread, and remembered which veteran liked westerns and which widow was learning to use a computer because her grandson lived far away. She kept a shoebox of spare reading glasses for strangers. She kept a tin of tea for anyone who looked like the morning had been unkind. There was a softness to her steps, but not the softness of weakness. It felt like the hush of fresh snow before footprints arrive. I would watch from a table by the window and see how her kindness worked in small circles. A sticky note left on a cover with a gentle recommendation. A hand hovering at a respectful distance when a child hesitated over a new word. She never rushed the syllables. She let them bloom. No one called it teaching. It was simply the room learning to breathe. Outside, the town throbbed with louder hearts. The diner threw its plates like bright coins. The hardware store chimed its bell a dozen times an hour. The council had meetings about banners and budgets and parades, and her name rarely made the minutes. She would stand at the edge of photos and then step back so someone else could fit. If there was an empty chair at any celebration, it chose her side of the table. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, when the light fell in long yellow planks, I would catch the shadow of her quietness bending over the returns cart. It looked like the weight of memories rested there. Not bitter weight, more like the heft of a blanket that has kept many shoulders warm and is frayed at the edges from use. I wondered what loneliness felt like to her, whether it came like rain that tapped and passed, or whether it stayed like fog that learned her name. Even so, she smiled in the way small petals smile, not to be seen, but because the season inside them insists. If you asked the town then who kept the place running, you would hear about the mayor, the coach, the woman who sold flowers. You might not hear about the librarian. Yet every morning the door unlocked, and the room breathed, and the town had a place where silence did not mean emptiness, it meant listening. The first time the boy came in, he was clutching a comic book so worn it seemed to have traveled through more hands than he had years. His shoes scraped the tile in hesitant strokes, as if he wasn't sure the floor belonged to him. She saw him, and without fuss, guided him to a corner where light pooled like a secret. She didn't ask questions he might fumble over. She simply placed a clean sheet of paper on the table and set down a pencil sharp enough to draw courage. From that day, he returned again and again, as though the library had become a shelter where no one measured his words or mocked his stumbles. She noticed the way his eyes darted when he struggled with a line, so she leaned closer without leaning heavy. When he faltered, she traced the words softly, letting the letters live on her lips before they lived on his. His laughter, when it came, sounded like a stone skipping water for the first time. What struck me most was not how she taught, but how she waited. Patience was her language. She never corrected with sharpness. Instead, she built silence around him, a silence thick with trust, until he found the answer himself. In that silence, the boy grew taller in ways rulers cannot measure. One afternoon, he carried a storybook home. The next day he returned, not alone this time, but with his younger sister tugging shyly at his sleeve. He introduced her not with words, but with the simple courage of walking her through the door. Soon after, a neighbor's child appeared, then another. The quiet woman didn't seek them. They found her like birds drawn to still water. She welcomed each one with the same gentle rituals, names remembered, books chosen carefully, encouragement placed like seeds in small hands. It was the boy who began to talk about her outside the library. At first, just in whispers to his friends about how she could make books open like doors, about how she remembered the exact page where you left your hope. Then he spoke of her at home, telling his mother that the librarian said he read better today. His mother repeated it to a neighbor, who carried it into the hair salon, where stories travel faster than news. Slowly, her quiet axe began to stretch beyond the shelves, weaving into conversations she never heard. The boy's eyes grew bright with a new certainty. He had discovered a secret no one else had noticed, and he carried it proudly, like a lantern in a dim street. Through him, People began to see her, not as the background of the town, but as its gentle center. She never sought it, never raised her voice. Yet in the reflection of a child's eyes, the quiet woman began to take her true shape. It started softly, like the first notes of a hymn carried on wind. Parents spoke of how their children now asked for books before bedtime. A teacher mentioned the boy's progress, how he read aloud with a steadier voice. At the grocery store, someone recalled how the librarian had once found just the right recipe book for her grandmother. The thread spread outward, almost invisible at first, until the whole town was stitched together by stories of her small mercies. One autumn evening, the library filled with more people than I had ever seen within its walls. The town council had suggested recognizing her, though she herself never asked for it. When she arrived, she looked puzzled, as if she had wandered into the wrong room. But the faces turned toward her with quiet smiles, and the boy stepped forward with a folded piece of paper trembling in his hand. He read slowly, each word deliberate, telling the town how she had given him courage. When no one else noticed, he was afraid. His voice cracked, but he kept going, and when he finished, the silence in the room was heavy with emotion, not emptiness. Others began to share. An elderly man spoke of how she had guided him through his first email, so he could see pictures of his newborn great-grandchild. A widow remembered the afternoons she had sat by her side, not talking, just being there, letting grief spill without judgment. A young woman told of how the librarian had slipped her a book on scholarships, setting her on a path that led far beyond the town's borders. Each story layered upon the next, until the quiet woman's life rose like a cathedral built from whispers. Tears blurred her glasses, and she tried to shake her head as if to deny what she was hearing. But the boy reached for her hand, grounding her in that moment. For once, she did not step back from the center. She stood there, fragile yet luminous, and the town saw her not as the woman who moved in silence, but as the heartbeat that had guided them all. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the lamps glowed low, she lingered among the shelves. Her hand rested on the spines, as if touching the lives she had unknowingly shaped. The library seemed to exhale around her, no longer just a room of books, but a living testament to what quiet devotion could build. She finally understood what had always been truth, that her silence had never been invisibility. It had been presence, steady and enduring, a gentle light that taught others how to shine. And the town, once deaf to her whispers, now carried her voice in their own hearts. Sometimes the world convinces us that only the loud are remembered, that only the bold leave marks worth noticing. But the quiet woman showed something different. She proved that kindness need not shout to echo, and that the softest hands can steady the heaviest burdens. Her legacy was not carved in stone, but in the daily choices of those she touched. Perhaps that is the truest way to inspire, by living gently, yet deeply, until others realize the strength in silence. If this story touched you, share it forward, leave a thought below, and subscribe for more tales of kindness.